Chris Eubank Jr. versus Marcus Morrison. Oh my God, where do I start with this? Where the hell do I start with this? This was one of the strangest things I've seen recently. I have to say recently because obviously we live in a time. I still remember a guy with a fan strapped to his back parachuting into the ring during a heavyweight title contest. So I can't say that Chris Eubank Jr.'s performance was the strangest thing that I've ever seen in boxing, because that would be a complete lie. We have seen some very, very strange things happen in this sport. But that being said, his performance, I still found it quite strange. I found it odd. On Friday night, I think it was, I was on the panel for Pep Talk UK. If you're not subscribed to Pep Talk UK, make sure you subscribe to Pep Talk UK, because it's nearly every week I'm on Pep Talk UK on the panel discussing boxing. So if you're into the live discussion, that sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to Pep Talk, hit the notification bell and all that sort of good stuff, and join us for the live panel on that, because it's always interesting. But I said on that panel, Chris Eubank Jr. needs to make a statement. New coach, been out the ring a while. He needs to make a statement. He is in the years of his career now, age-wise, and the number of fights he's had. If he is going to have the big defining fight against someone like Golovkin, Andrade, however you want to pronounce it, even Canelo, if Eubank Jr. is going to have these big fights, it's now. It's over the next couple of years. I mean, he's already had big contests. George Groves, obviously, that was a big contest. That was a world-class contest. It was a world title fight and part of a massive tournament. So Chris Eubank Jr. has been at a high level, and that was at super middleweight as well. He needed to make a statement. And I said what I would like to see from Chris Eubank Jr. is a workmanlike performance. Show us the improvements that you've made with Roy Jones Jr. Because we all the things that Eubank Jr. needed to work on were pretty damn obvious. The jab. Did not have a good enough jab in terms of speed and frequency of it, power of it, use of it. Come on, I mean, we all know, even people who, aren't necessarily coaches or boxers, people who have been watching this sport for a long time, even if they've not participated in it in any way, shape or form, your general boxing fan knows how important the jab is, because the commentary team talk about it all the time. The boxers themselves talk about it all the time. It is so important because everything comes off it. It's a defensive punch. It's an aggressive attacking punch. It's a range-finding punch. It sets everything up. It really does. Everything works off the jab, and there's a reason for that. It's tried and tested and proven. You need to have a good jab if you're going to fight at world level. So we needed to see that. Footwork, head movement. We needed to see better, because at times I think Eubank Jr. has looked a little bit slow at closing the gap. George Groves outmaneuvered him that way. Going all the way back to the Billy Joe Saunders fight. Billy Joe Saunders, great movement. Chris Eubank Jr. had trouble closing the gap and cutting the ring off. So we need to see quicker feet from that point of view. And also head movement. Must be moving the head. Now that said, the first bell goes for round one, ding ding. Two boxers come out to the centre ring, and the very first punch thrown, Marcus Morrison throws a really nice stiff jab, and it hits Eubank square in the face. And that was like the first, it's like ding ding, walk to the middle, pop. And because there's no crowd there or anything, you just heard the smack of it bouncing off Eubank Jr.'s face. And straight away I was like, ooh, oh dear, this is not going to go particularly well. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I was thinking, oh, here we go, Marcus Morrison's going to cause a big upset and beat this guy. I wasn't necessarily thinking that. But straight away, the alarm bells are ringing, and I'm thinking, is this a new and improved Chris Eubank Jr.? And then they settle into round one, and Junior's holding his hands in a very strange way. Now, I know in professional boxing there are a lot of very varied ways of holding your hands. I mean, personally, I like, call me old school, call me a traditionalist, I like to see a nice high right hand. And I like to see the left hand up as well, protecting the face, and a nice tight. You could call it European style maybe if you want to. But again, there's a reason why that is good, or there's a reason why when a boxer first walks into an amateur gym, that is how they are shown to hold their hands. I don't know of a boxing club where when you first walk in the gym, they say, oh, well, what you're going to do, I want you to have your left hand down by your knee and your right hand's going to be on your chest, and you're going to do this with your shoulder to block shots. No one starts boxers off that way. That is developed over a long period of time. You have to learn the rules before you can break them. Now, it was all, I mentioned this on Twitter. Eubank Jr. is holding his hands in quite a strange manner. The right hand was kind of here, sort of thing. Yes, Roy Jones used to do that. He used to kind of do this. The left hand was out somewhere. Now, straight away, the replies that I got on Twitter was, he's trying to be Roy Jones Jr. He's trying to do a Roy. And I understand that. But here's the problem. That style suited Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. was a hell of an amateur. He went to the Olympics, and the only reason why he didn't get a gold medal was they had to shaft him for it. That's a well-known story. And I think he got a silver medal, and they still gave him Boxer of the Tournament, which is the ultimate slap in the face after shafting the guy over the gold medal. But look, Roy learned the traditional way and then adapted and developed his own style to suit his physiology. The reason why Roy was able to hold his hands in the manner that he did, he had very long arms. He could use his arms as a rangefinder. I think it was... can't remember the boxer's name now. And it's embarrassing because my dad taught him and his brothers when they were at school. It'll come to me. It'll come to me at some point. But people have said that when you think you're out of range, Richie Woodall, it was Richie Woodall. Richie Woodall said, you think you're out of range, and then Roy will whip round a left hook, a very long left hook, or he'll come in with the straight right hand. Roy used his arms out at length like that. He was judging distance on people. And he knew when they came into a certain range of his hands, he could let them go like that. And it kind of let him down a little bit later on in his career as he slowed down. Obviously, with Tarver was a long-range fighter, taller than Roy, long arms, and it was more difficult for him to judge distance. Also, obviously, he'd been up to heavyweight to fight John Ruiz, come down, and had real problems making 175 again. Roy, that style is only going to suit boxers of Roy Jones' physiology and ability. Eubank Jr. does not have those long arms. He doesn't have the speed or power of Roy Jones Jr. Because that's the other thing. from that stance of holding your hands there, Roy could still knock people out. He could really damage people either with the left hook or the straight right hand. After what I saw against Morrison last night, I don't think Eubank Jr. has that power or anywhere near that power. I love the way Eubank Jr. puts his punches together. And don't get me wrong, Eubank Jr. is a hell of a talent. I've always said Eubank Jr. is a hell of a talent. I love the way he puts his punches together. When he gets someone on the ropes and goes to work, he is like a force of nature. He really is. But that's the area of his game that I think they need to cultivate and then base a strategy around that and develop his own style. Eubank Jr. spent God knows how many years of his career emulating his father, and now he's emulating Roy Jones Jr. Chris, just be yourself, man. Develop your style. Be you. So that was weird. That was strange. Then, obviously, Morrison, I think Marcus Morrison deserves plenty of respect because he could have got out of there numerous times in that fight. I think even during the 7th round, I think it was Joe Gallagher was saying, I'm going to pull you out unless you show me something. And Morrison went out there and showed him something. I still think Eubank Jr. was too easy to hit. I still think there's a lot of room for improvement on his head movement. I think Roy Jones mentioned that in the commentary. I mean, Roy obviously said, look, I told him to get the rounds. And that's why when Eubank had Morrison on the ropes, he stepped off a couple of times. But still, I'm not sure that was it. With the punches thrown and landed, if Eubank Jr. was a bigger puncher, that fight would have been stopped. There was actually quite a nasty point. Might have been round 8, might have been that round 7, where Eubank had Morrison back, put in a whole salvo of punches, and you just saw the blood splatter from Morrison, from his nose, I think, and it was all up the ring post. It was quite brutal to watch. So look, don't get me wrong, Chris Eubank Jr., when he puts those shots together, it's brutal. It really is brutal. How's he going to fare at world level? He wants Golovkin. I don't think he has the power to keep Golovkin off. You think about how you'd beat Golovkin. I think you either have to do it over 12 rounds where you have very good feet, where you can move and stay away from him and have a very good jab, and where you can pop that out and use that. Power-wise, though, you have to remember when Canelo fought Golovkin, well, twice. You look at the shots that Canelo hit Golovkin with. It didn't dissuade him from coming forward. Didn't stun him, wobble him, or anything like that. So if Canelo, putting everything he can behind shots, could not dissuade Golovkin from coming in, I don't see how Chris Eubank Jr. does it. And as I said previously, I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. has the best feet in the world. So I don't know how he does that either. And when you look at Andrade, good jab, awkward style, good feet. I don't know. I'd love to hear your comments. Please let me know what you think of this. Where Chris Eubank Jr. goes. Do you think he's improved under Roy? I think Roy has worked well with him. I think he has developed a jab, which is good. But for everything that they've improved, I think other flaws have opened up, namely with defense and head movement and that sort of thing. So I could probably talk about this for a long, long time. I thought it was a bizarre thing to watch. Again, it wasn't particularly workmanlike. There's Chris Eubank Jr. trying to showboat and mess about. That comes later. That comes when you're actually dominating opponents in a manner that Roy Jones used to. Roy Jones used to firmly get the upper hand in a contest before he started doing all the chicken strut and all that sort of thing. But there you go.